We're here on Tesvav Beis, and we're studying the machlokas between Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva about geula, about someone who shells out to be podeh an eved ivri hanimkar lenochri before the completion of his servitude. And we're going to have a question about who is podeh him. Is it the krovim or is it acherim? And in which case does the servitude now get deflected to the one who was podeh and shelled out the money? To Sanya, we learned in the Brisa, lo yigoel pe'ela. So there's definitely an exclusion here in the pasuk. Rabbi Yossi Aglili Omer be'ela. If one of the krovim was podeh the eved, then l'shichur, then he goes out free, and there's no shibud to the podeh. B'shar kol adam, however, if somebody else who's not a relative is podeh the eved, then l'shibud, then he picks up the balance of the avdus, whatever's left. So in other words, we're going to be more mekil on behalf of the krovim. Rabbi Akiva Omer be'ela l'shibud. On the contrary, if the krovim were podeh, then the shibud now is deflected towards the krovim. However, b'shar kol adam l'shichur. If somebody off the street shells out of his own pocket to be podeh the eved shenimkar l'nochri, then the shibud is completely pakad. He's yotzi l'cheres. Now the Gemara points out that both according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili and according to Rabbi Akiva, we darshan the word ba'ela, and it's different than Rebbe. So therefore, according to both Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva, who don't have the luxury of the word ba'ela, they would hold that there's no miyud of nochri, of nimkar l'nochri, that he's excluded from sheish, from yitzia v'sheish. So that even though Rebbe on the one hand would exclude nimkar l'nochri from yitzia v'sheish, both Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Akiva would agree that no, that's not so. That even an eved nimkar l'nochri is yotze b'sheish, which means that they accepted the gzeres shava of sochir, whereas Rebbe rejected. My time at Rabbi Yossi Aglili, first the Gemara wants to analyze the internal machlokas between Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva. Amar kroim lo yigoel bi'ela. Bi'ela means krovim because earlier in the pasuk it mentions dodo. And it's mashma that the krovim cannot be goel, ela bi'acher, only an acher could be goel. So what does it mean, v'yotza b'shnas hayovel? So it means that if they were podeh and it's not a karov, then there's no shichur. Why? Because now we deflect the shibud and the avdus over to the podeh, who's an adam acher. And that shibud continues until the yovel. So it means that in the case of the krovim, who are obviously obligated to be podeh their relative, the pidyon is final and it creates an absolute shichur. Rabbi Akiva is going to say just the opposite. Omer im lo yigoel ela bi'ela. And that's what we saw yesterday, that Rabbi Yossi Aglili argues that Rabbi Akiva is adding ke'ilu, another word to the pasuk. And he's saying that it says ela bi'ela, meaning only in the case of the krovim, then it's v'yotza b'shnas yovel, the avdus continues, and now the shiva is deflected onto the krovim who are goel. But if it was nigal yidei adam acher, who's not a karov, then he goes l'cheres miyad, a complete cheres. Now, intuitively, Rabbi Yossi Aglili makes a lot more sense, because a guy from the street who pulls out, a roll of money, to pay the akum and be podeh the eved ivri, l'chora, he should be buying those hours and days and weeks and months that there's still a shibud. Whereas the krovim, Rabbi Yossi Aglili would argue, they have an obligation to be podeh, and that pidyon is absolute. The Gemara says, second, Rabbi Yossi Aglili what would he answer to Rebbe? I'm sorry, to Rabbi Akiva. Midi ela bi'ela ksiv. You're adding another word, Rabbi Akiva, to the pasuk. With all due respect, it says in lo yigal bi'ela, which means that if it wasn't a gula through the krovim, so we cannot dash in the way Rabbi Akiva dashes in lo yigal ela bi'ela. There's no word ela in the pasuk, and you have no license to interpret that in the case of krovim who are goel, then the shibud continues until yovel. So therefore, at this point, the Gemara wants to substitute and replace a different explanation of the machlokes between Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva. Ella, this is not the Ella that Rabbi Akiva added. Ella b'haikra kamiflagi. Their machlokes revolves about a different pasuk in the parsha Pijon Evich and Imkaliakum. It says O dodo O ben dodo yigolena. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take this one pasuk, divide it into three parts, and we're going to cover three different categories, three different scenarios. First one is the krovin. Then we have ohisiga yado, and that's referring to the Eved himself. So he now has enough money to redeem himself, gulas atzma. Then we have a third category, which is indicated by the word at the end of the pasuk. It says v'nigal. And that's referring to gulas acherim, a man off the street who's not a karov. We're going to derive from this that anyone who is capable and went ahead and was poda the eved adim kali akum, even against the will of the adon. So the guy is not interested in accepting this money to free the eved, but nevertheless, in all these three cases, he can throw the money in his face, put it on the table, walk out, and the Eved is free. And here's where we have Machlokas Rabbi Yossi Aglili in Lefanav and Liachrav. So this is really a review of what we did yesterday. Rabbi Yossi Aglili Sarvar Mikra Nidrish Lefanav, which means Shadi Geulas Krovim Agulas Atzmo. Lefanav means we take the top one and push it to the one that comes afterwards. So that just like in Gulas Atzmo, the ransom and the freedom is absolute, so too in Geulas Krovim, it's absolute. Ma Gulas Atzmo l'shichur, af Gulas Krovim l'shichur. But if Acherim are goel, then they deserve to take over the shtat, take over the shibud until the yovel. Rabbi Akiva Savar Mikra Nidrosh Li'achram. The way we do a drasha is it goes Li'achram. So we go from the middle one back to the top one. Shadi Geulas Acherim. I'm sorry, not to the top one before it, but to the one after. Right, the one before it was Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Shadi Geulas Acherim Agulas Atzmo. So now we're going to compare the last one to the middle one. The middle one was Goel Atzmo, which is completely Yotza L'cheres, it's Shichur. And now we're saying that Acherim is also L'shichur. So I would say, according to Rabbi Akiva, the Goel who's paying out of pocket is what you call a good Samaritan. I mean, he has no vested interest here. He's not a Karov. He's not going to gain any shibud from the Eved. But in the case, according to Rabbi Akiva, of Gulas Krovim, there they take over the shibud. Which again, as I said before, I think is counterintuitive. If the machlokes is in fact between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi Aglili, where the nidrus l'fanav li'achrav is be'ela lamali. Why did they mention in their drashos the word be'ela? And we saw in the brisa that Rabbi Yossi Aglili over be'ela l'shiv, Rabbi Akiva over be'ela l'shivu. And now, according to this new explanation, the machlokes between Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva has nothing to do with the word be'ela. And the Gemara says it does have to do with be'ela. Ilav be'ela havamina. I would have thought that mikra nidrish bein lefanav bein li'achrav, that the Torah wants you in a case of a sandwich to be dorish in both directions, lefanav and li'achrav, and therefore kol l'shifra in all three cases, whether it's obviously atzmo or whether it's the krovim or whether it's acherim. In all cases, there's an absolute shifra, like goel es atzmo. Ihachi hadar kushtal duchta. So now that the machlokus is totally in the word be'ela, then we go back to our original question. How could Rabbi Akiva darshan from Vimlo Yigal as if it said Be'ela, and he's adding a word to the pasuk? Ella says more B'svarakam Ifligim. Rabbi Yosef Mistabra Geula. I'm going faster because we did this yesterday. Mistabra Geula Sacherim L'Shibud. It makes most sense to say that if other people, and we want to entice them and encourage them to be goel, therefore they get the shibud. What would motivate them if they don't take over the shibud to shell out of pocket in order to be poda this Yisrael shenim karali akus? So that makes absolute sense. On the other hand, the krovim are obligated to be poda. We don't have to give them any additional incentive, and therefore immediately after the pigeon, the shifra. Rabbi Akiva Sover Mistaber Gulas Krovim L'Shibud. This is, I think, where we got up to yesterday. According to Rabbi Akiva, we're going to say that if krovim are podahim, they take over the contract, so to speak, and now the evidence is meshubah to them. Why? To iyamrit l'shichur. If you're going to tell me that whenever the krovim are goel, and apparently they're obligated to be goel, then there's shichrur and there's an absolute freedom with no strings attached, is then every person who has krovim could do the following act. He'll say Kol Yom Yom Azul Nas B'Nafshi. Every day he's going to sell himself as an eved to a guy. He's going to rely on the fact that the krovim will be poda him, because if they have the wherewithal, we force them to be poda their karov. And if that be the case, on a daily basis, he's going to guarantee himself freedom, even though he sold himself to Abdus on that very day. So therefore, Rabbi Akiva is going to interpret the word Be'ela as referring to Acherim. And the meaning of the pasuk is that if Acherim are not Podim, but rather Krovim, then he goes out Bishnas Hayova, which means that he's Meshubit his Krovim. Because again, if he's not Meshubit his Krovim, then Kol Yom of Yom Azulim is Benafshe. However, in the case of Krovim, that up until the Yovel, he is still an Eved. In this case, now he deflects his work towards the Krovim who are Podim. Omar Rab Chia bar Abba, Rab Yochanan Sudiv, Rab Yosef Rab Akiva al Chachamim Omar Kol Shichrur. It means that the Chachamim darshan bein lefanov ubein lachorov. Man Chacham hu the Chacham Rebbe demapik leila hai. He uses the word be'ela for another drasha. Mikra nidrash bein lefanov bein liachrov. So the Gemara asks for Rebbe hai v'yotza b'shnas hayov mayov. We learned from the word v'yotza that until the Yovel he's Meshubad. In what case is he Meshubad? Because now we're saying, according to Rebbe, Ben Lefon Ben Liachrov, everything is the Shechur, whether it's Krovim or Acherim. And the Gemara answers, Mi boy leil chedesanya v'yotza b'shnas hayovel. And now we have another halacha.